I outsmarted my husband's elaborate scheme to steal our business, and he lost everything. Fair warning, this is going to be long, but I promise every single detail matters. Grab some coffee, because this is wild. Let me start from the beginning. 10 years ago, I met Jason at a business networking event in downtown Chicago. I was 25, fresh out of business school, and full of ideas, but short on capital. He was 28. Charming, and had just inherited $50,000 from his grandmother. We clicked immediately. Not romantically at first, but as business partners with complementary skills. I had the vision and strategy. He had the initial funding and sales personality. We started a digital marketing agency. Nothing fancy initially, just the two of us working 16-hour days from a cramped apartment that doubled as our office. I handled all the creative strategy, client retention, and operations, while Jason managed sales and client acquisition. Within 18 months, we'd grown from 0 to 35 clients and hired our first 3 employees. By year 3, we were pulling in 7 figures annually. Somewhere between the late nights and the shared victories, we fell in love. Or at least I thought we did. Jason proposed on the anniversary of our company's founding on the rooftop of the building where we'd rented our first real office space. It was perfect. Almost too perfect, looking back now. Before the wedding, Jason suggested we get a prenuptial agreement. I actually appreciated this because it showed he was thinking practically about protecting what we'd built together. Our lawyer drafted a comprehensive contract, but there was one clause that Jason insisted on personally. If either of us committed infidelity during the marriage, the faithful spouse would receive the unfaithful spouse's entire share of the business. At the time, I thought it was romantic in a weird way, like he was saying our commitment to each other was tied to our commitment to what we'd built. I signed without hesitation, because I never imagined being unfaithful, and I trusted him completely. We got married in a beautiful ceremony in Napa Valley. 75 guests, perfect weather, everything you'd see in a wedding magazine. The first few years of marriage were good, great even. The business continued to grow exponentially. By year 6 of our marriage, we had 42 employees, offices in 3 cities, and annual revenue approaching $8 million. Then things started to change. It was subtle at first. Jason became distant. He started taking calls in private, spending more evenings working late at the office. He'd come home smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. Classic signs, right? But I was so focused on managing our expanding business that I initially dismissed my suspicions. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of running a rapidly growing company was making me imagine things. The real wake-up call came about 8 months ago. We were at a company party celebrating landing our biggest contract yet, a contract worth $1.2 million annually. I'd been the lead strategist on the pitch, spent 3 months developing the proposal. At the party, Jason gave a speech taking credit for the entire deal, barely mentioning my involvement. When I confronted him later that night, he said I was being too sensitive and that nobody cares about the details, they just want to see leadership. That's when I started paying closer attention. I noticed he'd been having a lot of private meetings with our company's CFO and our business attorney. Documents would be quickly closed on his laptop when I entered his office. Phone calls would end abruptly when I walked into a room. I wasn't just being paranoid anymore. Something was happening. Then came Marcus. Marcus was attractive, I'll give Jason credit for that. He approached me at a coffee shop I frequented, claimed it was a coincidence, and struck up a conversation about a book I was reading. He was smooth, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He asked for my number to continue our discussion about contemporary literature. I politely declined, mentioning I was married and showing my ring. He apologized, said he hadn't noticed, and that was that. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, another man, David, approached me at the gym. Different guy, same energy. Overly friendly, trying to establish connection, asking if I wanted to grab a smoothie sometime. Again, I declined. It seemed like a normal interaction, the kind of thing that happens in a city like Chicago. Then came Ryan at a bookstore. Then Alex at a business conference in Miami. Then Christopher at a restaurant where I was having lunch with a client. Each one was attractive, well-spoken, and seemingly interested in me. Each one pushed just a little too hard to get my personal number, to meet up for coffee, to continue conversations that I deliberately kept brief and professional. I'm not naive, and I'm not someone who thinks every man who talks to me is hitting on me. But this was different. The frequency was unusual, the pattern was suspicious, and the timing, right when my marriage was deteriorating, felt too coincidental. By the time Michael approached me at a charity gala we were attending, I was actively suspicious. Michael was younger, maybe 30, and his approach was more aggressive than the others. He complimented my dress, my jewelry, asked what I was drinking, and somehow maneuvered himself to be standing next to me for most of the evening. When he suggested we get out of this boring party and go somewhere more interesting, I noticed Jason watching us from across the room with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not jealousy, something else. Anticipation, maybe? That's when it clicked. These weren't coincidences. These were setups. I went home that night and didn't say a word to Jason about Michael's advances. Instead, I started my own investigation. I hired a private investigator named Rebecca Chen. She came highly recommended, a former police detective who now ran her own agency specializing in corporate and marital investigations. I told her everything, my suspicions about the men approaching me, Jason's strange behavior, and the prenuptial clause about infidelity. Rebecca's eyes lit up when I mentioned the prenup clause. "That's your smoking gun," she said. "If your husband is orchestrating this, he's trying to manufacture evidence of your infidelity so he can claim your share of the business. But we need to prove he's behind it." She got to work immediately. Within a week, she'd identified 3 of the men who'd approached me. All of them had recent, unexplained deposits in their bank accounts, ranging from $2,000 to $5,000. All of them had text message exchanges with a burner phone number. Rebecca couldn't prove the burner phone belonged to Jason yet, but the circumstantial evidence was compelling. Meanwhile, the approaches continued. There was Nathan, who showed up at my yoga class. There was Brandon, who somehow got my work email and sent me flirtatious messages. There was Eric, who approached me at a networking event and was so persistent that I had to get security involved. Then came number 15. His name was Adam Richardson. I recognized him immediately, even though it had been over a decade since I'd seen him. Adam and I had been in the same study group in graduate school. We'd spent countless hours working on group projects, studying for exams, grabbing late-night pizza when the library closed. We had been friends, good friends, but never anything romantic. After graduation, we'd lost touch, like so many graduate school friendships do. When Adam approached me at a coffee shop near my office, I was confused at first. Was this another one of Jason's setups? Or was this genuinely a coincidence? But something in Adam's expression was different from the others. He looked uncomfortable. Conflicted even. "Sarah," he said, using my actual name instead of some pickup line. "We need to talk, privately." We sat down at a corner table, and what Adam told me made my blood run cold and then boil with rage. Jason had approached him 3 weeks earlier. They'd met through a mutual business connection, and Jason had pitched it as a favor for a friend. He told Adam that I was unhappy in our marriage, that I'd been making comments about wishing I could reconnect with old friends from graduate school, and that I'd specifically mentioned Adam. Jason said he wanted to arrange a chance encounter to help rekindle my social life because I'd been depressed. He offered Adam $5,000 to approach me, strike up a friendship, and see where things led naturally. Adam, who'd been going through financial difficulties after his startup failed, initially agreed, but as he started researching me to prepare for the approach, he discovered articles about our business, our marriage, and the success we'd built together. Nothing Jason had told me made sense. I didn't look depressed in any of the photos. Our business was thriving. Something felt wrong. "I did some more digging," Adam continued, his voice tight with anger. "I have a friend who's a private investigator. I asked them to look into Jason. Sarah, your husband has been doing this for months. I'm number 15. He's paid at least 14 other men to approach you, try to seduce you, and get evidence that you'd been unfaithful. He's trying to trigger the infidelity clause in your prenup so he can take your share of the business." I sat there in complete shock. I knew something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the extent of Jason's betrayal and manipulation was devastating. Not just because of the attempted business theft, but because of what it meant about our entire relationship. How long had he been planning this? Had he ever actually loved me? Or was I always just a means to an end? Adam pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of his text exchanges with Jason, including messages where Jason encouraged him to be more aggressive and to get her somewhere private where you can make a move. There were Venmo receipts, bank transfers, everything documented. "I can't be part of this," Adam said firmly. "What he's doing is sick. I came here to warn you and to give you everything I have. I don't want his money, and I don't want any part of this scheme." I thanked Adam profusely, my mind already racing ahead to what I needed to do next. But then Adam said something that gave me an idea. "You know," he said thoughtfully,
He's expecting me to report back to him about whether I successfully seduced you. What if I told him I did? What if we gave him exactly what he thinks he wants? I immediately called Rebecca Chen and asked her to meet us. When she arrived 30 minutes later and heard Adam's story and saw his evidence, she actually smiled, which was terrifying and reassuring at the same time. "This is perfect," she said. "Here's what we're going to do." The plan was brilliant. Adam would tell Jason that he'd successfully seduced me, that we'd started an affair. He'd provide just enough detail to be convincing, but not so much that Jason would demand photographic evidence right away. Meanwhile, Rebecca would intensify her investigation into Jason, using the information Adam had provided about his burner phone and payment methods to trace his other activities. If he's been this calculating about setting you up, there's a good chance he's already lined up his exit strategy. He probably has someone he's planning to be with once he's stolen your business. We need to find out who that is and get evidence of his own infidelity.
Adam agreed to the plan. He texted Jason that night. "Mission accomplished. We need to meet to discuss next steps and my final payment." They met 2 days later at a bar downtown. Adam wore a wire that Rebecca provided. Jason was ecstatic, asking for details, asking what evidence Adam had. Adam kept it vague but convincing, saying we'd met up several times, that things had progressed naturally, and that he could provide testimony if needed, but hadn't taken photos because that felt too invasive. Jason seemed satisfied, even grateful. He transferred another $3,000 to Adam's account right there at the bar and told him to stay close in case he needed Adam to provide statements or testimony. Meanwhile, I began my performance. I started mentioning Adam from graduate school to mutual friends, saying how nice it had been to reconnect. I made sure these conversations happened where Jason might overhear or where people who might mention it to him were present. I changed my schedule slightly, adding unexplained absences that Jason would notice. I started smiling at my phone occasionally and then putting it away when he entered the room. All the classic signs of someone having an affair, but nothing concrete enough to prove anything. Jason took the bait completely. He became more attentive suddenly, asking about my day, wanting to know where I'd been. Not out of genuine interest, I realized, but because he was gathering information for his case against me. He suggested we take a vacation to reconnect, which I now understood was probably an attempt to either catch me communicating with Adam or to have more time to go through my phone and computer. While I was performing my fake affair, Rebecca was doing real investigative work. She followed Jason for 3 weeks straight. What she discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Jason had been involved with someone for almost 2 years. Her name was Brittany. She was 22 years old, and she worked as a server at an upscale restaurant downtown. From what Rebecca could piece together, Jason had met her while entertaining clients. What started as casual flirtation had evolved into a full-blown relationship. He'd rented an apartment for her in River North, paid for her tuition at a local college, and bought her a car. All of this funded by taking money from our business in ways that our CFO had helped him disguise as legitimate business expenses. Rebecca got everything. Photos of them together at the apartment, videos of them on vacation in the Caribbean, a trip he'd told me was a solo golf retreat with college friends, text messages where he called her his future wife and discussed his plan to get rid of Sarah and take the business. There were messages to Brittany explaining his scheme to set me up with other men, with Brittany actually helping him select which men to approach me based on Sarah's type. The most damning evidence was a voice recording Rebecca obtained of Jason and our CFO, Marcus Chen, discussing their financial arrangement. Marcus had been helping Jason embezzle money from the business for over a year, redirecting funds through shell companies and falsifying expense reports. They'd stolen approximately $300,000. In the recording, they discussed how once Jason got my share of the business through the infidelity clause, they'd push me out entirely, potentially even frame me for the embezzlement they'd committed. It wasn't just about him wanting to be with someone younger. It was about greed, pure and simple. He wanted everything we'd built, and he was willing to destroy me to get it. Rebecca delivered her report to me on a Thursday afternoon in late March. The file was 4 inches thick, filled with photographs, bank statements, text message logs, surveillance reports, and witness statements. Adam had provided a detailed affidavit about Jason's scheme to set me up. Rebecca had found and interviewed 3 other men Jason had paid who were willing to testify once they understood they'd been part of an attempted fraud. I spent the weekend reading through everything, crying sometimes, but mostly just feeling a cold, focused rage. On Monday morning, I did 3 things. First, I called an emergency board meeting with our company's directors, all of whom I'd cultivated relationships with over the years. I presented them with evidence of Marcus Chen's embezzlement and involvement in Jason's scheme. Marcus was terminated immediately, and we filed a criminal complaint against him that afternoon. Second, I called the best divorce attorney in Chicago, actually as friends this time, once the legal storm had settled. Patricia filed for divorce that Wednesday. The petition included a motion for immediate injunctive relief, requesting that Jason be barred from accessing business accounts and that his share of the business be placed in receivership, pending resolution of the infidelity claim under our prenuptial agreement. We attached a summary of evidence with the filing, enough to show the court we had a strong case, but not enough to reveal our full hand yet. Jason was blindsided. He called me that night, screaming, demanding to know what I was doing. I stayed calm. I know everything, Jason. Every single thing. The men you hired, Brittany, the embezzlement, all of it. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, you don't have proof. I have a 4-inch binder full of proof. Photos, videos, bank statements, text messages, witness statements, your burner phone records, Brittany's lease that you're paying for, everything. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? More silence. Then he tried a different approach. Sarah, we can work this out. We don't need to destroy everything we built. We can negotiate a fair separation. You mean like the prenup we already signed, the one you drafted specifically with that infidelity clause because you were already planning this? No, Jason, we're going to court, and I'm going to take everything. The legal process took 6 months, but it was worth the wait. Patricia was a force of nature in the courtroom. She presented our evidence methodically and devastatingly. The photos of Jason with Brittany, the text messages discussing his scheme, Adam's testimony about being hired to seduce me, along with testimony from 3 other men Jason had paid, the financial records showing the embezzlement, the voice recording of Jason discussing his plan to frame me. Jason's attorney tried everything. They argued the prenup was unconscionable. They claimed Jason was entrapped by our staged affair with Adam. They tried to muddy the waters by claiming I had been emotionally abusive, and that justified his actions. None of it worked. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, named Judge Patricia Morrison, saw through every argument. During closing statements, she actually interrupted Jason's attorney to ask, "Counsel, are you seriously arguing that your client hiring 15 men to seduce his wife, embezzling $300,000 from their jointly owned business, and conducting a 2-year affair while plotting to steal her business assets is somehow equivalent to her staging a fake relationship after discovering his scheme? Is that genuinely your position?" The attorney had no good answer for that. Judge Morrison's ruling was everything I'd hoped for and more. She found that Jason had clearly and egregiously violated the prenuptial agreement through his affair with Brittany. She found that his scheme to set me up was attempted fraud and potentially criminal conspiracy. She awarded me Jason's entire share of the business, just as the prenup specified. Additionally, she ordered Jason to repay the $300,000 he'd embezzled with interest. She granted me the divorce and gave me our house, most of our joint assets, even the vacation property in Michigan that Jason loved. As for what Jason got, he got his car, a 2012 BMW that was already 8 years old at the time of the divorce. He got a one-time payment of $15,000, basically to help him secure a new apartment and move out. And he got to avoid criminal prosecution, but only because I decided not to press charges for the embezzlement, figuring that taking everything he valued was punishment enough. Brittany broke up with him 2 weeks after the judgment came down, apparently realizing that a 40-year-old man with no money and no business prospects wasn't as attractive as a successful business owner. Last I heard, Jason was working as a sales manager at a tech startup, making a fraction of what he used to earn from our business. The company is thriving now. With Jason and Marcus gone, I brought in new leadership, including a fantastic CFO named Jennifer, who's completely overhauled our financial systems. We've grown 23% since the divorce finalized. Employee morale is higher than ever, partly because most of the staff figured out what Jason had tried to do and were disgusted by it. Several longtime employees told me they'd been planning to leave if Jason had succeeded in taking over, so his scheme actually would have destroyed the business he was trying to steal. Adam and I did become friends again, genuinely this time. He's since started a new company that's doing well, and I've been able to help him with some business advice and connections. No romance, despite what Jason tried to manufacture, just a good friendship rekindled under the strangest circumstances. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever thought possible. Therapy has helped me process the betrayal and manipulation. I've learned to trust my instincts again. I've built stronger boundaries and better support systems. And I run a thriving business that I built from nothing that no one can ever take away from me again. Looking back, the irony is almost funny. Jason created that infidelity clause in our prenup thinking it would be his weapon against me someday. He spent months and tens of thousands of dollars trying to manufacture evidence of my unfaithfulness. But in the end, that same clause became the instrument of his own destruction. He was so focused on his elaborate scheme to frame me that he never considered I might discover his actual affair, the one he'd been conducting for 2 years while plotting against me. There's probably a lesson in there about karma or poetic justice or the dangers of being too clever for your own good, but mostly I think it's a lesson about underestimating people. Jason underestimated my intelligence, my resourcefulness, and my willingness to fight for what I'd built. He saw me as an obstacle to be removed rather than a partner who'd helped create everything he wanted to steal. His biggest mistake? He forgot that I was the strategic mind behind our company's success. He'd always been the face, the sales guy, the schmoozer, but I was the one who planned, who saw 3 moves ahead, who turned ideas into systems and systems into success. He should have remembered that before going to war with me. The business is mine now. The house is mine. The life I wanted to build is mine. And Jason, he got exactly what he deserved. A used BMW and the knowledge that his own greed and betrayal cost him everything. I'm not grateful for what Jason did. The betrayal still hurts, and I've lost time and emotional energy I'll never get back. But I am grateful for what I learned about myself through this ordeal. I learned I'm stronger than I thought. I learned to trust my instincts again. I've built stronger boundaries and better support systems. And I run a thriving business that I built from nothing that no one can ever take away from me again. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, investigate. Document everything, and never ever underestimate your own strength or the importance of having good people in your corner. I couldn't have done this without Rebecca, Patricia, Adam, and the friends and colleagues who supported me through the darkest parts of this nightmare. And one final thought. If you're going to include an infidelity clause in your prenup, maybe don't violate it while simultaneously trying to frame your spouse for violating it. That's just bad strategy all around. Thanks for reading, Reddit. I needed to get this story out there, and writing it all down has been surprisingly therapeutic. I'm finally ready to close this chapter and start the next one, this time on my own terms.
Related comments. This hits way too close to home. My ex-wife tried something similar but way less sophisticated. She just straight up cheated and then tried to claim I was abusive to get more in the settlement. Didn't work, thank God, but it cost me $70,000 in legal fees. Question though, how did you keep your cool for those 6 months while everything was playing out? I would have lost my mind. Also, did any of your friends or family know what was happening, or did you keep it completely secret until the filing? Author, I told exactly 3 people before filing. My sister, my best friend from college, and my therapist. That's it. Even my parents didn't know until after we'd filed. I needed people I could trust absolutely who wouldn't accidentally say something to the wrong person. The hardest part was acting normal at company events and family dinners. I basically became an actress for 6 months. Would not recommend, but it was necessary. Comment. Former family law paralegal here. The prenup clause is actually genius from a legal standpoint, but I'm surprised it held up so cleanly. Usually these infidelity clauses get challenged as punitive or unconscionable, especially when the asset value is this high. Your attorney must have been incredible because getting that kind of judgment with full business transfer is rare. Most judges try to find some middle ground, even with ironclad prenups. Also, the fact that he literally documented his own scheme with text messages and bank transfers is mind-blowing. I've seen a lot of dumb criminals, but this is next-level stupid. He basically built your entire case for you. Comment. Am I the only one who thinks some details here don't quite add up? 15 different guys approached you over, what, a few months? And you didn't think that was weird until like the 10th one? Also, conveniently, one of them happens to be your old classmate who decides to blow the whistle? Not saying it's fake, but this reads like a legal thriller novel. The timing is just too perfect, the evidence too clean, the villain too cartoonishly evil. Real life is usually messier than this. Author, I get the skepticism.
It does sound almost too perfect in retrospect. But it wasn't 15 guys in a few months. This was spread over about 8 months. Some weeks nothing happened, then suddenly 2 or 3 in a row. And I did think it was weird. That's why I hired Rebecca after like the 7th or 8th guy. The Adam thing was lucky timing, absolutely. But that's how it happened. Trust me, while I was living through it, it felt anything but perfect or clean. It was terrifying and confusing, and I second-guessed myself constantly. Comment. Your ex is an idiot, but I gotta say something that might be unpopular. You both signed that prenup. You both agreed to that clause. Yeah, he's scum for cheating and trying to frame you, but that infidelity clause was always going to be a weapon for whoever used it first. It's not exactly a healthy foundation for a marriage when you're both sitting on a nuclear option like that. The embezzlement, though, that's straight up criminal, and he deserves everything he got for that. But the prenup situation, I don't know, feels like you both created a marriage where you were just waiting for the other person to slip up. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Author. I get the skepticism. It does sound almost too perfect in retrospect. But it wasn't 15 guys in a few months. This was spread over about 8 months. Some weeks nothing happened, then suddenly 2 or 3 in a row. And I did think it was weird. That's why I hired Rebecca after like the 7th or 8th guy. The Adam thing was lucky timing, absolutely. But that's how it happened. Trust me, while I was living through it, it felt anything but perfect or clean. It was terrifying and confusing, and I second-guessed myself constantly. Comment. Your ex is an idiot, but I gotta say something that might be unpopular. You both signed that prenup. You both agreed to that clause. Yeah, he's scum for cheating and trying to frame you, but that infidelity clause was always going to be a weapon for whoever used it first. It's not exactly a healthy foundation for a marriage when you're both sitting on a nuclear option like that. The embezzlement, though, that's straight up criminal, and he deserves everything he got for that. But the prenup situation, I don't know, feels like you both created a marriage where you were just waiting for the other person to slip up. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Author. You're not entirely wrong. In hindsight, having that clause probably meant neither of us fully trusted the relationship from the start. At the time, I thought it showed commitment, like we were both promising to stay faithful or face consequences. But you're right that it created this underlying tension. Live and learn, I guess. If I ever get married again, big if, I'm not including clauses like that. Either you trust someone or you don't. Comment. The audacity, the absolute audacity of this man to be upset when you filed for divorce after you found out about his affair and his scheme. Like, sir, you spent months plotting against her, stole $300,000 and had a whole other relationship, but somehow you're the victim? Make it make sense. My blood is literally boiling reading this. I'm so glad you took him for everything. Men like this need to learn that women aren't just accessories to their lives that can be discarded when convenient. You built that business together, and he tried to erase your contribution. Disgusting. Also, shout out to Adam for having a conscience. A lot of people would have just taken the money and kept quiet. Comment. The thing that gets me is the CFO being involved. Like, that's a massive breach of fiduciary duty. And honestly, Marcus should be facing criminal charges too, not just termination. $300,000 in embezzlement isn't just getting fired territory, that's prison time. Was there any consideration of prosecuting him separately, or did he cut some deal? Also curious about the business valuation. If you were doing $8 million in annual revenue, the actual business value was probably somewhere between $10 and $20 million, depending on profit margins. Your ex literally gambled a potential $8 to $10 million stake on a scheme that required 15 different random dudes to successfully seduce you. The risk-reward calculation there is absolutely insane. He could have just asked for a buyout or negotiated an exit. Instead, he chose the most elaborate, expensive, and legally dangerous path possible. Author. We did consider prosecuting Marcus, but ultimately decided against it because it would have meant depositions, discovery, potentially a trial, and a lot of public attention that could have hurt the business. We recovered most of the money through the civil settlement with Jason, and Marcus is basically unhireable in our industry now, so his career is over anyway. Sometimes the practical solution isn't the most satisfying one. And yes, the valuation was in that range. His whole plan was bonkers from a risk standpoint, but I think he was so convinced I'd eventually give in to one of the guys he sent to me that he didn't see it as risky. Massive miscalculation, obviously. Write what you think about this situation. Also, if you like this video, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos. See you next time. Bye-bye.